Um, I've known Chuck for a lot of years, and I've been around as he's been developing different methods for success. And originally, it was formatted around sports, but when you start looking into it deeply, you find that it's not just sports. The tools that Chuck is teaching are tools that can be used in business and in many other places to be successful. And today we measure everything with SATs and tests, and we look at a child and say the better they can perform in a test, the more successful they'll be. And that's so far from the truth. A lot of your major success stories are based around the tools that Chuck is actually teaching to athletes. And a lot of these young athletes are actually taking it not only for sports, but they're taking it into their daily life and into their future when they graduate college and go out and get a job. And that's one of the things that I'm happy to be here and talk about those tools. And a child today, we're not getting those basic necessities to the child in a educational format in K through 12. And Chuck and we were talking about things like a vision. And basically, we tend to sometimes look at a vision and we don't shoot for the moon, meaning that a lot of people will look at a child or an athlete and they'll laugh at them because they are shooting for the moon. And extraordinary people take their internal self and they learn these tools that Chuck is teaching, and they actually do shoot for the moon and they become very successful. And not just in success, and through your life, you're going to have diversity. And that diversity is that you could have failures. And when you're failing and you have a good set of tools, you can learn to turn things around. And that adversity is going to be shown to everyone who lives. You're going to have the high times and you're going to have the low times. So maybe Chuck could explain a little bit more about the vision.
Well, Jim, basically what we put together is and I termed it a full armor training program, and it involves 5 steps. The first step is quantified by understanding energy and how energy moves. So we're not going to take the normal grade school, high school curriculum language and try to pass it off as that's what we're staying with, because that's all you're going to understand. My work with athletes, I find that the more I give them, they're not limited in what they can retain as we think they might be, but I give them a whole lot to think about, and we go back and we reiterate the things that we discuss. This is really about self-esteem. And as you know, I deal with a lot of high-level athletes, professional players that have been drafted and such, and other acquaintances that have played in the NFL and Major League Soccer and such. These are all the things that get them to where they have gotten in life. I just explain it in a way where there really is no luck. It's really a matter of the energy that you carry with you and how you portray that energy out. And I'm going to get into some new technology that quantum physics is the new term they use now. You can call it anything you want, but it's not just what philosophers have been saying all along or poets have been writing about and what parents have been preaching, but there's a science behind this now. We are along the way in our world where we're starting to understand how the universe works. And to not pay attention to those signals and those scientific understandings is ludicrous. Why do something when we have a full understanding and we're afraid to talk about it because it's new? I mean, the world's not flat anymore. We can turn on the TV from across the living room, and on and on and on. I can talk to someone in Australia from my phone. We've gone beyond what we so-called call normal, and we're starting to understand how the world works and why we get in life what we get and why we don't. Excuse me, and why we don't. So this is about success. This is about failure, if you want to use those terms. But from working with the athletes especially, there is no failure. There's only an opportunity to learn. And we stress that over and over and over again, because the other tools that are involved in this is once you understand what energy is, there's another component to it called information. And when you possess the right energy about yourself and you have information, whether it's about how to film a sequence or how to hit a baseball or how to succeed at Wall Street, it all goes down to your energy and the information you know about that product. And that gives you what we call success or failure. So going from energy and information, once we have an understanding, a working knowledge of it, we go to what we call a vision. And it's basically a vision for our lives. When people perish for they have no vision. So we stress for our athletes and other people that I counsel as well is, what is your vision for your life? What are you trying to accomplish? What do you want to see and why do you want that? And you got to come to grips with those questions, because if you don't have a clear understanding of your vision, or at least feel your way to the better understanding of what you want in your life, you're going to wind up in someone else's plan. And that's how it works. And marketing companies know this. Multi-billion-dollar companies know this. And they're going to advertise in such a way that is going to get you to buy, and it's part of the U.S. way of doing things. But what we teach our kids is to be fundamentally sound, having the right self-esteem where they establish their life the way they want it to be, and not live under the premise of how others think they should be. So with the physical aspect, which is number 3 on the list, as an athlete, you're not going to be a 250-pound lineman and think you're going to be a jockey at some horse race. The vibration there is not going to line up. And that's what we're talking about as we get into more of the science of this. We now realize that all of us that are on this planet, we carry an energetic frequency with us. And we now know through the study of science, biology, through experiments and things like that, we now know that we are the reason why we attract things into our life and why we repel them in our life. Why are we successful, why we're not. And that's what Full Armor does. It gets you a deeper understanding of what's going into your life, what's around you right now, and is that something you want to keep experiencing, or is that something you want to change? And that leads us into the 4th category, and that's called contrast. And in life, we're always given contrast. We're given what we would call obstacles. They are not necessarily bad things, but they are reflective about what is happening inside of us, our thoughts, as they become feelings. We send out a vibrational energy. Sometimes people walk into a room and they feel, oh, the aura is off in this room. I don't feel comfortable around this person. Or, man, he's a warm and fuzzy guy or woman. So the spice of life is contrast. Without it, we couldn't create. And energy has to continue to flow. And when we allow that energy to flow and we accept obstacles or contrasts in the right perspective, where we're not offended by it, we're not torn up by it, we don't retreat from it, but we handle it properly, giving these 5 armor tools, we can proceed in our life to our last stage. And that last stage is allowing. We allow our life to unfold the way we want it. Now, it's only going to do that when we understand the properties of how energy moves, and our mindset and our feelings and emotions about things are the catalyst to bring things either into our lives that we've wanted or repel them from our life.
The interesting thing is that one of the things Chuck has been speaking about is energy. And, it's if you look over the past few hundred years, a lot of very famous people, we'll use Einstein, they come up with the theory of relativity. Well, we act as if it was something newly discovered. It was always there. The laws for gravity, for when we fly an airplane, we've used those rules to learn how to fly from point A to point B. But those rules were always in place, and that's the neat thing. What Chuck is actually teaching in these programs is the fact that when you really look at how energy either repels or it attracts like a magnet. And there's in our brain, our body, there are each of us has a frequency, and you can actually send a positive frequency out, or you can send a negative frequency out. And the nice thing that he's teaching the athletes is that when the negative comes to them, instead of broadcasting a negative back out against it, what they're actually doing is broadcasting a positive and looking for another direction to head in a positive fashion. So they're eliminating a lot of that negative energy that's bad for us.
Well, it's synthesizing is what it is. We don't want to pull things apart. Yeah, we do analyze in our lives, and with the athletes, we do go over, okay, this is what's happening in your swing. This is why you're throwing the ball. This is why you're shooting it incorrectly. And you have to be open to what a coach or a trainer who's qualified, and I will say that, who is qualified and knows what they're talking about, because if you don't, you could run yourself also out of alignment. But normally that happens so that you know where you're at. If someone does lead you down the wrong road, you got to look at, okay, why did I bring that? Why did I help attract that into my life? And when your motives are in such a way, or we call positive energy, whatever, you're going to attract the right circumstances into your life. And while you're doing that, we have. I know we don't mention God in schools a lot, and I use the term a lot. I don't make it a religious term necessarily, but there is a creator to the universe, and that universe is set in motion with certain laws. So just like a plumber coming to your house and fixing your toilet, or a carpenter or a doctor figuring out what's wrong with you, there is a universal law or practices that in order to live the life that you want to live, wouldn't it make sense to tap into that information on the energetic side so that we don't keep running into the same problems? And we know what they're about. We're cut from the team. I'm dropping passes in the game, and you have to look at it in a different way. And what we found from science is that as we experience anything in our lives, whether it be sports and I know you're a wealthy businessman and you use these concepts, we have to understand that life unfolds a certain way, but how do we take that information and process it correctly? And the way to do that is through what are your feelings and emotions about that? Because that's what the universe really relies on to hear from you. When I say we're broadcasting a signal, this world is created out of passion and support for us. I mean, do you get up in the morning and figure out, how do I get the sun to come up? How do I get the next breath out of my body? How do I chew my food? And it's all done for you. So it's a very supportive world that we live in, and we have taken that supportiveness, and instead of encouraging it, we scare people and we limit them. And we want everyone to shine in full armor. In the full armor program, we want kids or youth or athletes to feel good about what they do, because your mood is everything. And I run into a set of numbers, say 1 to 20, 25, whatever, about different moods that you have. And the bottom of the list is obviously lethargic behavior, depression, things like that. And then up the scale, you run into anger, rage, revenge. And then further up the scale are things like hope and promise and faith. And then you go even higher than that, and you go maybe into creativity or satisfaction, or you're just appreciative of everything that comes into your life. And when you go up the scale emotionally and you feel those emotions, the universe responds to those emotions. And if you live at the bottom of that emotional scale, what science is now telling us, we will attract exactly what we feel in life. You may say, okay, how did I get in that car accident? Or why did the umpire not give me the strikes for that day? You're going to experience life. But the key here to remember is no matter what happens, it's a reflection of what's going on with you. And if you can be brave enough to say, okay, I see what's happening in front of me. And yeah, we all have knee-jerk reactions. And that, I guess you'd say that's normal. We have certain things in our body that we've been raised about, and and we feel a certain way about things. And that's a number of items that could be.
Well, to give a perfect example of what you're talking about is we have natural tendencies for survival, and we have learned tendencies to survive. And one of the natural things is you don't stick your head under the water and breathe in. You're going to fill your lungs with fluids and you could die. However, when you first learn to scuba dive, at some point, we've developed the technology where you can actually breathe in and have air come into your lungs. And you would think that the average person would just go under the water and breathe in. Most people can't do that the first time. They actually have a fear to take that first breath. But once you've taken that first breath, then you realize you have a support system and the fear starts to leave. And that's a natural tendency for survival. To give an example of fear that's produced as a learned way is we go to school our whole life and the teacher says you got a 70 or you got an 80 or you got a 60. And we look at the 60 as I failed. Now, just because you failed on a test, and if you want that information, there's no reason why you can't go back and learn the other 40% and become perfect and have that information because it's something that you really want. And that's kind of when Chuck is talking about allowing, is you've taken all the steps to get there, but that breath that you're going to take in, that's allowing. And a lot of us, we're afraid of that. And you actually have to practice it. Most of us have to practice, some more so than others. But
key word you mentioned there was wanting. And that is something, if you ever dealt or spoke or trained as a professional athlete, maybe a billionaire, or a doctor or a lawyer, you have to want that. And when we fall into complacency and we don't want anymore, we have an issue. We have a problem. We have a stagnation problem. And normally what happens from a physics standpoint, life comes along, and that stagnation, if we're so afraid of moving forward, you're going to run into life whether you like it or not. And it's going to show you things that you may not enjoy experiencing. So I tell our kids, if you know that's going to happen, you're going to run into this, why not be prepared for it? And this is the information we give them. Why? Yes, knee-jerk reactions are part of life. We see something, oh my gosh, I didn't see that coming. But if we really sit back and we intellectually give these tools to our kids, our athletes, whatever, they're going to get a better understanding of how life works, how they work within life. And as I have done myself, I have made catastrophic mistakes when I was, young. And I still mess up today. But at the same point, even though I'm experiencing life, I'm still learning from it now, and I approach it in a different way. It doesn't mean that I still don't have these knee-jerk reactions, but I'm able to calm down from it right away and say, okay, I need to perceive this differently. It's kind of like a test. But if you don't start looking at life and saying, how am I responsible for that happening, you're never going to get to what we're talking about. If you're going to be in denial and say, that was my neighbor's dog who, did X, Y, and Z on my lawn, believe it or not, you got to look at yourself and say, okay, what made that occur, and what am I to learn from that? And you don't start getting into that kind of mindset, then you're going to fall into the world and how it's unfolding.
I got a fast question for you. I was around when you did Program to Win, the DVD that I guess was broken down into 5 parts, 5 tools.
Right.
Where do you think the average person who doesn't understand this concept, what's the number one step they need to take to start heading that direction?
I would say a willingness, a wanting to learn. Like I said, I was brought up Catholic in my life, and without getting religious about it, there was a phrase in the Bible that says, "With all thy getting, get wisdom," and I've held on to that ever since. And without wisdom, you're going nowhere. You're falling. You're reacting to life wherever it shows its head. So, but with wisdom comes understanding, and when you have understanding, you start realizing, okay, I understand how that happened. I understand how I have to react to that. I understand how to resolve that issue. You start learning, and that is the information part of the energy. When those two come together, that gives you that frequency that you're talking about, that vibration. And when that vibration's on the scale of excited, passion, appreciation, gratitude, that's when other related items in your life that you've hoped for are going to start showing up. But if you say, I want to go to a Division I college to play baseball, I want to make $1 million by the age of 25, that dream can't find you if you're in a pessimistic way, because you created that dream in excitement, right? So in that excitement, the frequencies, just think of a radio tuner. If you're on 93.3 and you want to hear the music on 98.1, you don't sit there on 93.3 and think, okay, why isn't the music coming through? But we do that in our life. What we have to do is change the frequency to what we want to hear. And in life, what you're trying to do is take those feelings of emotions and graduate beyond lethargic behavior, beyond fear, beyond revenge. And when you can live in passion and appreciation for everything around you, that frequency now lines up with the dream that you had, because that was created in excitement. Your dreams are not usually created in depression. They're usually created in that exciting moment of your life, that passionate moment of your life. Well, that's where the frequency is held for you. And through science, we now understand, until we allow that frequency to rise within ourselves, the frequency that we created our dream with can't find us. And we wonder, it's not happening, it's not working. And that's where the hardest thing to do about this is to recognize, okay, what I wanted hasn't arrived in my life yet. So what am I doing that's not allowing it to happen? And that's the toughest rub for people to get their head around.
The frequency in our bodies is, to me, extremely critical. Back in the, I'm going to say, late 70s, I bumped into a fella that he was the head of thoracic surgery for one of the largest hospitals in the country at the time. He quit. And the reason why he quit was because he felt mainstream medicine wasn't heading in the right direction. And one of the things that he did, he actually gave me the plans. I have an electrical background. He gave me the plans to build a device that where I could take and I could amputate your hand and come back 24 hours later and take a picture, and you would actually still see the aura of the missing hand in place. And our body was actually still projecting a frequency out, an energy field, even though the hand was no longer there. And that's where energy becomes really critical, because if you are allowing the wrong energies into your body and into your brain and your thoughts, you are going to definitely reap bad things. If you find a way to constantly correct and get the good energy in, the good things will eventually start coming to you. A lot of very successful people, they do a thing called vision mapping. if they have a goal that they're setting in their life, they actually draw a map out of how to get there. And they look at that map several times a day to make sure that they're staying on course with their objective. And that's what allows them to become successful. The average person doesn't have a vision map. The average person doesn't understand how to even align the energies within your body. And that's something that, Chuck and I, we went round and round for a long time on that process. I mean, you look at how electrons and protons in our body, we all are electrons and protons. And when you really look at something, you might find that there might be two more electrons than in one compound versus another, but they're still protons and electrons, and it all comes back to how we manipulate them. And with us, we have a makeup, and as we start thinking about things and using our thought process, we can actually start making our electrons and protons vibrate in a different way. And that's where that negative versus positive comes into play. But it's an actual science when you can look at someone's hand that's been removed and you see it there. That's an actual science. And what this doctor believed was that we should start looking more into the magnetic fields and the frequency of a human body to correct disease. And he was taking it that far that you can cause and you can also correct disease in your body.
Well, yeah, the phrase, everything's a miracle until you understand how miracles work, and then they're not miracles anymore because you now have an understanding of why that happened. And that's the revolution of our society. We're learning how the game's played. And that goes we have the ability to teach this. And we're not getting it into our kids, and the riots you see on the street, and every other thing down the, Al Qaeda, and these are things that we're talking about today. And if everybody had an understanding of the ramifications of their thoughts, their feelings, and they wanted not to produce that product because it was hurting another individual or another human being, you would look at yourself and say, I need to make sure I don't do that. But at the same point, you're looking to what feels good to you as well. And that doesn't mean that you don't go on a killing spree or anything like that. That just means you're disconnected to do something like that. But I'm really talking about the individuals that aspire to do things in their life. You need to form that feeling that we're talking about. And whether it's, if you're in anger and you can't pull out of that, I tell people, go to sleep. Get rid of the momentum. You're going to pick it up the next morning, but at least you stop the momentum. We're proving I'm not sure if we know exactly how many seconds or minutes have to go by before we create enough momentum where we start attracting into our lives. But there is a science to holding on to a thought more than 17 seconds, up to 64 seconds, where we now just created that frequency for ourselves. So the key here is not to have knee-jerk reactions to things, but to have the wisdom to catch yourself right away and say, how can I better deal with this? Sometimes it's not jumping into the argument where you're just continuing to argue. You're not going anywhere. Maybe it's sometimes changing the subject. Maybe it's go to another room. Okay, think a different thought. Reach for the feeling that feels better, whether you're broke, homeless, rich, whatever. When you're dealing with a life situation, and I tell the athletes all this time, stop focusing on the problem, because we know from science, the more you focus on it, you're going to get that same problem back. So what do? You take the information, you process it, and you go in a direction that feels a lot better. Let the old momentum die out. And then the life that you want to live, you've kind of like passed that test. And then you move on and you start creating the life that you want to create. But you got to understand these principles. And our hardest thing as human beings is a lot of us don't want to accept responsibility for what we do. And we think it came out of the blue or something like that. But when we're ready to take responsibility for what we do, we start processing life differently, and we can change life. Because life is meant to be enjoyed. It's not meant to be grounded into the dirt and, and whatever other paraphrasing statement you can say, we're meant to succeed. We're meant to be glorious in our nature, and that's what we teach.
And the idea that where you had mentioned about changing the thought process in our society, if someone approaches you in a negative way, a lot of people just have a tendency to ramp it up a little bit higher back to that person that presented the negative thought. And the key to what I've gotten out of Chuck's DVD is that you have to shut the negative feeling that you're experiencing, shut it out, and then remember and look at what your goal and what your objective is, and put the positive back into how am I going to get around this without you don't have to play tick for tack with someone.
Well, let's end it here. When you're in depression and you're overwhelmed by life, it's a very hard task to ask for appreciation and realize, boy, I'm just super thankful that this guy's yelling and screaming at me or flipping me the bird in traffic. That's too much of a reach. But if you're in depression, I tell people, reach for anger. It's okay, because the last place you want to be is depressed. You want to work up the emotional scale. And to get to, excitement and passion and gratitude, it's too big of a leap for people. But if they start understanding what they're going through, and let's say I've had it, you're PO'd or whoever or whatever situation, yeah, reach for anger. And then you have your emotional scale that maybe the next time, God, I hope this doesn't happen again. And then you get up to, this is a great day. And I have this information now. This guy just flipped me the bird in traffic, but I know better now. And I'm going to be on my merry way. And those circumstances don't arrive in your life anymore. They dissipate because you stop feeling the momentum to give them life in your life.
Yeah, and the guy in traffic, when he's flipping you the bird, a lot of people want to get angry and flip it back. But if you bring the positive back in again, you say, hey, geez, I'm alive and I didn't have an accident and I'm going to get to where I'm going to. So what does this really matter?
But if you have the understanding, a lot of us, we struggle with this. But when we get these tools, we start processing life differently. And that's when life really changes for us.